welcome to R.K Medicos. In this section, we are going to discuss about the physiology and about the basically general physiology. We already discussed 4 parts. In this 5th part, we are going to discuss about the membrane potential and what does it mean membrane potential. Before the definition of membrane potential, we want to know something about the cells and the extracellular spaces, intracellular spaces, and what are the electrolytes, what are the elements which are present outside the cell, that is extracellular compartment and in the extracellular fluid, and what are the elements or the electrolytes which are situated or present in the intracellular compartments. Basically we can see here in this we can see in this table there is electrolytes. What are the electrolytes? What are the electrolytes is present in the extracellular compartment? As we can see, the extracellular fluid concentration, these are present in basically extracellular fluid, and these are present in intracellular fluid, and these are the electrolyte concentration. When what amount of the electrolyte concentration is basically the normal for our human beings. We can see the sodium is an electrolyte. Their concentration will be in the extracellular fluid, it will be like the 135 to 145 milliequivalent per liter. It will be for the extracellular fluid. It means in the intracellular fluid the sodium concentration will be like 10 to 14 milliequivalent per liter. Then now you can tell me the sodium concentration in the extracellular fluid will be higher. Of course it will be higher. In intracellular fluid it will be lower. So the positive charge, the sodium is having positive charge. It is like the cation. Cation means the positively charged electrolytes. It is having the higher concentration of the sodium in the extracellular fluid, and the lower is where the sodium concentration in the intracellular fluid. So we have to memorize this whole table for the understanding of the electrolyte concentration, where they are going to move in the normal concentration. And in the normal way we can say like this: the potassium, the chloride, bicarbonate, calcium, phosphate, or the magnesium, this all is having different values in the different regions like the extracellular, intracellular, and they are moving according to concentration gradient. Where the gradient is moving basically depends on the number or the milliequivalents of the per liter, where the in the plasma where the electrolytes are increasing or decreasing. They are maintaining the gradient. Basically how they move across the membrane, they are maintaining the gradient, and these membranes, they are maintaining the gradient we can say like this, they across the membrane. That's why they are called as membrane gradient basically. And what is the definition? We can see here the membrane gradient is, or the potential gradient, the potential gradient that forces the ions to move passively in one direction. There is a moving of any ion passively without any expenditure of energy or the ATP. They are moving in the other direction. That is creating a potential, that is creating an electric potential. And we can see the positive ions are attracted by negative side membrane. Suppose that here is a membrane and the membrane is negatively charged. It means they attracted what? The extracellular fluid containing positive charge. Positive charge, what is the higher amount of extracellular fluid? Is the sodium is basically higher in amount in the extracellular fluid. They are going to attract here, and this theme is called as potential gradient. Next one point we can see here, the negative ions by the positive ion. The negative ion is attracted by the positive membrane. When the positive membrane is present, then negatively ions gets attracted. So we can say here is the positively ion is present, then which ion is going to attract here? Negatively ions. So same manner they are creating potential, and we are going to see what are the different types of membrane potential, what are the different types of membrane potential, and they play a role in our general cellular physiology, or the cellular, we can say the membrane potential in the general physiology. In the first potential we are going to see the resting potential. What does it mean, the resting potential? When our cell is in resting stage, the cell is performing the normal function in the resting condition. What is happening? The membrane and what the cell bonding structure, this cell is having several potential is created inside the cell membrane, and which forming the in the resting condition. That potential is called as the membrane potential basically. And what is the resting membrane potential? When the cell is in rest, and the potential of the cell in that time is called as membrane potential. Which ion is responsible for the maintaining the potential gradient or in the resting membrane potential. We can say in this picture here, in this picture, what is it? This is the suppose that cell membrane, we can see here. And you can see in the top there is a outer part of the cell membrane. This is the inner part. What happened to the outer part? Basically there is the movement of ions. We can also see here somehow there is a negatively charged ions, negatively charged membrane, and the membrane of the cell is gets negatively charged. There is a negative which gets accumulated inner part of the cell membrane. It means what? They are going to accumulation of the negative charges here, and these negative charges are going to accumulate in the inner part, and it leads to, in the resting condition, there is a diffusion of some ions, that is the potassium ions is moving outside during the what, in the resting condition. Why they are moving outside? Because the concentration gradient of the potassium inside the cell will be higher. You know, now we can see from that chart the potassium concentration inside the cell will be higher than the outside the cell. So this concentration of potassium is creating a potential here. That's why they are moving from higher concentration to lower concentration. And this movement of potassium according to concentration gradient is, or according to their concentration, this is called as diffusion, simple diffusion. When the gaseous exchange will be occur, simple diffusion. When there is a different types of carrier proteins are required, that is facilitated diffusion. Here is the no any carrier proteins are required. So these are the diffusion, simple diffusion of potassium in the resting condition. When the cell is resting, these potassium are going to diffuse from inside to the outside, because the higher concentration of potassium inside the cell, it leads to the moving to outside, because the potassium in outside cell is very, very less. And here is the higher, so they are moving outside the cell. It's so simple. And now you tell me, which ion is responsible for the maintaining the resting membrane potential? That's clear now. The potassium is maintaining the resting membrane potential because they are going to move out according to concentration gradient. We can see also here, the potassium is a dominant. The potassium is dominant intracellular ion. Already told you. And this diffusion of potassium across the cell membrane in to out, that is inner part to outer side, inside to outside, and inside the cell membrane becomes more negative at rest. Inside the cell membrane of the innermost of membrane is going to more negative, and this potassium are going to move outside. This positive charge are moving outside, and it leads to maintaining the resting membrane potential. So now we are going to see two more points. The resting membrane potential is represented as RMP, and this resting membrane potential for the most of the cells in our body are 90 millivolt, that is minus 90 millivolt for most of the cells. But for the neurons it is minus 70 millivolt, for the neurons. In our central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system, there is a neuron, and this neuron is having resting membrane potential is minus 70 millivolt. These values are very important for us, so we have to memorize it. The resting membrane potential for the other parts of body cells, that is minus 90, and in the neurons they are minus 70 millivolt. Next point, we can see here the causes of resting membrane potential, because the diffusion of potassium ion outside and it maintaining the negatively charged accumulated in the inner surface of the membrane. We can see here in the blue, and these are the negatively charged accumulated here. This is responsible for the resting membrane potential maintaining. And the diffusion potential, what is the potential is created by the potassium, is called as diffusion potential of potassium. What the potassium ion is moving outside from the higher concentration to lower concentration, that potential created, that is called as the diffusion potential of potassium, and it maintains what? Resting membrane potential. It causes what? Resting membrane potential. And what the resting membrane potential is caused by? The charges of potassium ion is responsible for the maintaining the resting membrane potential. The concentration gradient, there is a higher in inside the cell, and outside the cell they are the lower. They are also maintaining the diffusion potential. Next one is permeability. Either the molecule is permeable, potassium is permeable for the crossing the membrane, so it is even in the resting stage of the cell the permeability of potassium is normal. So that's why they are also maintaining the diffusion potential. and this is also called as the resting membrane potential. Now you can tell me the three things, that is potassium is a positive charge, they are having permeability for the membrane. Next one, the concentration gradient from higher to lower. These all are the three conditions which maintaining the diffusion potential of the potassium. Now we can see when next term is it here, restless membrane potential. What does it mean, restless membrane potential? When the cell is unstable, they are fluctuating. Restless means these cells are restless, their resting moment potential is gets oscillating in between somewhere. The resting moment potential is going to oscillating in between some manner. It means there is in between some values, we can say like this, 6 to 4, like this, they are oscillating in between something. So the resting moment potential is oscillating basically in between -60 to -40 millivolt. The resting moment potential of the membrane, the resting moment potential of the membrane is gets fluctuating, they gets oscillating in between the -60 to -40 millivolt basically, and that's why they are called as restless membrane potential. Their membrane potential are not gets fixed, they are gets changing with time. And we can see these are called as resting membrane potential is with oscillating, they are gets changed. And this is also called as unstable potential. Basically they are going to oscillate, and these are seen in all the pacemakers of our body. And what are the different pacemaker? One you know, that is SA node of our heart is acting like this. Their potential, resting potential is gets oscillating in between -60 to -40 millivolt. So now you tell me, where the restlessness, or the we can say restless or the unstable resting moment potential we can see in the pacemakers. In the first, there is SA node of our heart, and second, interstitial cells of the sajal. Interstitial cells of sajal is present in the GIT, and in the GIT it is responsible for the contractility or motility of the GIT muscles. That is basically what are the muscles present in our GIT tract or the GI tract. These all muscles are going to in contractile nature, and the contractile nature is due to the interstitial cells of the kajal. And we can see in the medulla is basically responsible for our respiration. It is the respiration center is present on our medulla, and there is a special group of neurons are present on the medulla that is called as pre-Botzinger complex. Pre-Botzinger complex is the group of neurons which is called as the pacemaker of respiration. And we can see these pacemakers of respiration is oscillating in between their their resting moment potential is gets oscillating in between something, and that is called as unstable resting moment potential. So these are the resting moment potential is unstable or the restless membrane potential. These are the new concept. This is updated concept here, and you have to know about it. What are the pacemakers in our body? That is the, now you know, pre-Botzinger complex neurons. This all we have to memorize it. Next we are going to see the second point, that is the equilibrium potential. What does it mean, equilibrium potential? When the cell is in equilibrium state, how we can say the cell is in equilibrium state? We can see here. Suppose that in the equilibrium state, what is happening? The concentration gradient means what? Concentration gradient means, you know, some molecules is higher concentration in the some region, and they are going to cross the membrane and going to the lower concentration molecule. The higher concentration moving towards the lower concentration. This higher concentration moving towards the lower concentration is called as gradient. That is concentration gradient. Simple. Then potassium is having higher concentration inside the cell, so it is going to move outside the cell. It is so simple. We can see here, this is outer, this is inner. It means these potassium are going to move out, and their amount will be lesser where outside the cell. They are moving, they are creating a gradient, that is concentration. Now we can see this potassium ion is positively charged, and they are moving outside, and there is somehow inside the inner cell membrane surface is having which charge is accumulating? That is negative. Why the negative charge is accumulating here in all this region? Because the positive charge is going outside. It means the negative charge is increasing. It means the negative charge is going to increase here, and it leads to there is somehow the force of attraction, the law of attraction. You know about it. The law of attraction or the force of attraction is going to attract this positive charge by the negative. What the negative charge is accumulated? What the negative charge is accumulated here in the inner surface of the cell membrane is going to attract the what the positive charge is present outside. So these potassium are what the potassium moving outside is going to attract by these negative charges, and this is called as a law of attraction. Here we can see these potassium are come back again into their initial position, and this is how maintaining the equilibrium here we can see. And this gradient, what is attracted by them, they are called as electrical gradient, because they are creating a gradient electrically, they are producing by these ions. And we can see here, if we can see the concentration gradient is what, now the potassium moving out and inside to outside the cells, that is maintaining the concentration gradient basically. And electrical gradient is what, when the potassium outside is attracted by the inside negative charges what is present accumulated inside the membrane, inner surface of the membrane. We can see if the concentration gradient means potassium ion is equal and opposite to the electrical gradient. Now imagine what is happening here. What the amount of potassium is moving out, these potassium gets accumulated once again in the initial position inside the cell. At that stage, when both the ions, the going out and coming in, will be no any movement, it is going to stop here, and there are no further movement of the potassium either outside or either inside. So at this stage there is no any movement, of ions in that region, and that is called as the equilibrium potential basically. So what is the equilibrium potential? The equilibrium potential at which it is the point at which the further movement of electrical gradient and the concentration gradient is going to stop in that region. The electrical gradient is what? They are created by the attracting these positive charges inside the membrane, and the potassium is coming again inside the cell, and the concentration gradient is what? Moving higher concentration to lower concentration. These both gradient will be equal and they are going to stop. There is no further exchange of these elements, and these are called as the equilibrium potential here. It's so simple. Next we can see there is no movement of ions in the equilibrium potential, and this is the most important here, the no movement of potassium across the cell membrane, because they are going to stop. Their concentration gradient will be same, the electrical gradient and the concentration gradient will be same, and this state is called as equilibrium potential here. The equilibrium potential we can attain. And at the equilibrium potential there is no any ion movement is occur. There is no any ion movement, now there is no any movement in the equilibrium potential. Now next point, there is no current flow. Why? The electrical what the electrical gradient is created here, this all electrical gradient is cancelled by the concentration gradient, and there is no any flow of current here. It's so simple. Next point we can see, and that point is called as, when there is no any movement, no any electrical current is flowing, no any movement of ions, this point is called as isoelectric point. So the equilibrium attained by these cells by the concentration gradient or the electrical gradient are going to same in that area, that is called as isoelectric point also. Now you can say if the membrane potential is at plus 60 millivolt, if the any cell membrane is having equilibrium potential, membrane potential is plus 60 millivolt, then sodium cannot be cross the cell membrane. They are not going to cross the cell membrane because the sodium is having equilibrium potential. We can see E is here denoting equilibrium potential, and for the sodium the equilibrium potential is plus 60. It means they are not going to move anywhere because it is the equilibrium potential. And now what does it mean, equilibrium potential? The concentration gradient is equal to electrical gradient, so there is no any movement of ions. So the equilibrium potential of sodium is 60. It means they are not going to move out or in, so they are stopped. Their isoelectric point is attained here. Next equilibrium potential we can see for the calcium is plus 30 millivolt. At this electrical potential event, at the plus 30 millivolt, the calcium is not going to move out or in. Same as for the potassium and same as for the chloride. For the potassium minus 90 millivolt, for the chloride minus 70 millivolt. And the resting membrane potential of neuron is minus 70 millivolt, and we can see here that is membrane potential, that is equilibrium potential, is equal to the resting membrane potential of the neuron. And which ion? That is chloride. Chloride ion equilibrium potential is minus 70, but the neuron resting membrane potential is minus 70 millivolt. So this is correlation. and this is all about the membranes. We have to learn it. What are the resting moment potential, what are the equilibrium potential, and how we know about it, and how they are going to attain, and what are the main role of it. We discuss later in our general physiology part, or the we can see in the neurophysiology. Everything we discuss later, but for now we have to memorize what the concentration gradient is doing here. Next point, we are going to learn Nonce equation. Now we want to calculate equilibrium potential for the different ions, or for the different electrolytes. We can see here the Nonce equation is going to helpful to us for calculating the equilibrium potential of the only one ion. X is here representing the any ion, and E is, now you know, equilibrium potential. Then we want to calculate equilibrium potential of one ion, any one ion, that is sodium, maybe potassium, maybe calcium, anything. So you want to calculate the equilibrium potential of that ion. We are using for the only single ion, we used Nonce equation. When you want to more than one ion, calculating there for the multiple ions, when we want to calculate the equilibrium potential for the multiple ions, suppose that sodium chloride and the potassium at the same time, then we used Goldmans equation. And what is the Nonce equation is here, we can see that is equilibrium potential of X ion is equal to plus minus 61 log into X is here ion, and here X is another ion. That is, what is the outside concentration of ion and inside concentration of ion. X is for the same ion, it means the same ion concentration is outside the cell and same ion concentration is for the inside the cell. We are going to divide it, and we get what? The equilibrium potential of the X ion. So it is for the single ion. Goldmans equation is for calculating the multiples ion, and it is also takes the consideration of concentration and permeability. In this Goldmans equation, we also calculate the permeability and concentration. We can see if it states what is the Goldmans equation means. During the electrical event or the electric event, we can say the multiple ions is movement. Nonce equation is says that during the electrical activity or the equivalent process, there is only one ion is moving, and it is not true. It is there is only one electrical event will be happened, and they are calculated there. But in this topic, about the Goldmans equation, they can it state that during the electrical event, the more than one ions is participate in the electrical event, and that is the sodium, potassium, chloride, or the many more ions will be participated in the electrical events. And these are creating a potential, that one is called as active potential, or action potential. Action potential is basically rather they are followed by the sodium, potassium, chloride. These are the channels will be opened that time. That's why they are stated that electrical potential is generated by the action. They are also called as action potential, and they are generated by the sodium, potassium, and chloride. We can say the sodium and potassium. The sodium is basically permeable more during what? Depolarization. And the potassium is permeable more during the repolarization. It means what? Suppose that this is the cell. The sodium is going to enter inside the cell. This sodium is going to enter inside the cell. In what case? In the depolarization. The cell is going to more positive charges. The cell is attained more positive charges. Inside the cells, the positive charges are increased, and cell is moving in the phase of depolarization basically. The cell is moving in the depolarization phase. Suppose that the potassium ion is higher inside the cell and they are going to move out. It means what? These cells are going to repolarization state. So these are the two terms you have to learn. Potassium is moving out. So they are more permeable for them, you know. And we discuss everything in the neurophysiology or the muscle physiology. For now, we are going to leave it. Next, what is the driving force means here? Assess the direction of movement of sodium and potassium. We are going to assess, or the assessment for the sodium and potassium ion movement, where the sodium and potassium ions are going to move, and that is determining by the driving force. And the driving force is how we are going to calculate the membrane potential minus equilibrium potential. What is the membrane potential of that ion? Now you can tell me. The membrane potential for sodium is what? The membrane potential for sodium, we can see that is minus 90 millivolt. That is the membrane potential. And what is the equilibrium potential for the sodium is? Plus 60 millivolt. You know, at the plus 60 millivolt, the sodium is not going to moving out or in. So it is the equilibrium potential for it. So now we are going to calculate what is the driving force for the sodium. We can see here driving force for the sodium is minus 150 millivolt. How? The minus 90 millivolt minus plus 60 is equal to minus 150 millivolt, and the driving force is determining the where the molecules is going to move, either outside or either inside. They gets attracted by the negative charges. Basically the positive charge molecules are going to attract by the negative charges of the membrane, and the negative charges of the membrane is going to attract by the positive ions. So these are the two different ways. We can say when the negative driving force is negative, the positive charge ion tends to move inside the cell, we can see also here they are moves inside the cell. Either the driving force is negative, it means also the negative charges ions are moving outside the cell. It's so simple. Now we are going to see the Gibbs-Donance effect. What does it mean? It is the basically created by the protein ions, and you know, and even you don't know about it, so you now we learn it. The inside the cell the negative charge are higher, you know, from the initial. The inside the cells the negative charges are very high, and that's why they are the electronegativity inside the cell. And inside the cell the protein concentration will be higher, and this protein is responsible for the, now you know, the protein molecules are, suppose that this is the protein molecule, and this protein is having several negative charges on its surface. So these protein are the negatively charged molecule basically. Now we want to only say the protein is a negatively charged molecule and it is present inside the cell. So there is a higher amount of protein inside the cells. It means the inside the cell the negative charge is maintained by the protein also. And we can see now, suppose that here is any membrane, we can see, suppose that this is the cell membrane, and this is the outer compartment, this is the inner compartment and outer compartment. Now you know the potassium concentration where is high, inner compartment. So their concentration, according to concentration gradient, they are moving out, and potassium concentration will be decreases inside it, but they are further they are going to move, and the potassium concentration will be slightly increased. Same as the chloride, they are also higher in inner compartment, they are moving outside and then maintaining. That also chloride is decreases in the lower amount in outside the cells. And protein is a negatively charged anion. Anion means that negatively charged. Basically, cation is positively charged. Anion is negatively. Protein is negatively charged molecules. They are present inside the cell. So it maintains the negative charge. And once again, you can say like that. This is the negatively anion is present inside the cells. They are the non-permeable. These are the non-permeant ion. We can say a word that is permeant means they are not permeable. Non-permeant means not permeable basically. They are not going to move across the membrane. So these molecules are present inside the cell always. So they are maintaining the negative charges always. So this is responsible for the generation of Gibbs energy. What is the concept of Gibbs energy? Is the what the protein molecules are present inside the cell are the negative charges. It has negative charge, and this negative charges is going to produce, or they are going to affect the distribution of permeant ion. What the ion is permeable is going to, like the potassium or the chloride, they are present inside the cell in the higher concentration, is going to moving outside the cell. Their permeability will be affected by the protein because they are moving out, but these negative charges will maintaining their charges. So they are affecting their distribution inside or outside the cells. So this affecting, basically the protein is non-permeant ion and the sodium potassium is, or we can say the potassium and chloride is permeant ion. They are moving outside, and this protein anion is going to affect the distribution of the permeant ion. What the ion is permeable, they are going to affected by this protein ions. We can say the protein anion is having negative charge and they can't cross the cell membrane or the membrane. They affect the distribution of permeant ion because they are not maintaining the charges. They are affecting the permeant ion distribution, permeable ion. What is the Gibbs energy? We can see like the Gibbs-Donance effect usage in our general life. Basically the Gibbs-Donance effect is having three uses. We can see here. First is in the above, we can see here second and third. First we can see here Now I'm going to tell you the protein is a osmotically active substance, and all the osmotically active substance is responsible for the movement of fluid towards it. It means all the osmotically active substance is a fluid lover basically. All the osmotically active substance is the fluid lover. They are going to attract the fluids. They are going to attract the water. Now you can see here, there is, we can see here is the water is present, and here is the protein molecules is present. And now I already told you the proteins is osmotically active substance. Osmotically active substance, and all the osmotically active substance is going to attract that the fluid level. So all the water is moving inside the cell, and the cell is gets swollen, and after that they gets burst. But before the cell gets burst, or the preventing for the bursting of the cell, there is a special type of protein is a special type of pump is present on the cell, that is called as sodium potassium pump. And this sodium is responsible for the movement of sodium inside the cell to outside the cell. And the sodium is also osmotically active substance. So once again, the water is inside the cell is also moving outside the cell. So the story is same. Protein is going to attract the fluids, and sodium is going to take out the fluids. So it will be the same, and the cell gets not burst basically. It is due to sodium potassium pump. They are going to moving out. The sodium is also osmotically active substance, so the fluid is moving out, and it is due to the sodium potassium pump. So it is the first usage of the Gibbs Nonce effect. We can say due to the protein anion, the osmotically active, the water uptake inside the cell, and the cell can swell up and then cell burst, and the cell is gets burst. But because the sodium potassium pump is present, the sodium pumping outside, and the cell won't be burst all the time. Next we can see the electrical difference across the cell membrane, how it's going to create due to the Gibbs Nonce effect. We can see here in the inner cell or outer cell membrane part. In the inner part, what is the protein amount is present, and the protein is ions. They are the osmotically active. They are the more inside the cell. In the inner part, the protein is gets more, and they are the more negative charges. The more negative charges, and outside the cell positive charges, they are creating a gradient potential, and that one is called as electrical potential basically. What the potential is created here due to negative and positive charges, that one is called electrical potential. In next section we are going to see, that is third point. We can see here, that is regulating the fluid movement at the level of capillary. Now you tell me, all the osmotically active substance is responsible for the movement of fluid towards it. It means they are the fluid lover. I already told you. It means these all proteins, what the proteins are present inside the cell here, these all proteins are going to considered as osmotically active substance. It is true. And all the osmotically active substance are proteins here. Yeah, proteins here. And basically in our cell, in the plasma, a special type of protein which is responsible for the maintaining of our plasma fluid level inside our body, that is albumin here. It is the most important term, that is albumin. It is colloid substance. It is going to regulate our fluid movement. All the proteins, osmotically active substance, is going to maintain or regulate our fluid movements at the capillary level through the help of albumin protein. And this albumin protein is exerting a pressure, and that pressure name is oncotic pressure. And this is the colloid nature of the albumin. They are also called as colloid pressure is created by that. So the albumin is the protein which is osmotically active protein, and it is going to create, or it is regulating the fluid movement inside the cells at the capillary level. And that's why the movement of fluid at the capillary level is leads to the edema. In some patients there is a loss of protein. The protein is absent, leads to edema because the protein is not present here. And the exerting a pressure due to oncotic pressure, the edema is developed in many patients due to albumin is absent in that area. So leave it for now. We have to discuss only the albumin is responsible. They are creating a pressure, exert a pressure at the capillary level, that is oncotic pressure or the colloidal pressure. They are the same. And this is all about the membrane potential topic. In next topic we are going to discuss about the fluid. And for now this all. Next topic we are going to define about the different types of fluids. So thank you, see you in next video, bye bye.